Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am Aggelos, and we are back for another week and another Phoenix Roundtable because I picked topics that are apparently so long that we can't get them out in a single episode. So this week, I managed to bring back the entire crew. They kicked and they screamed and they tried to get away, but I didn't let it happen. First off, in chains, bound and fettered, the errant penman himself, Isarii. Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You know, some people are into that anyway.
Yeah, well, you know, some people pay good money for that.
And I came ready to talk about the stocks.
I see that. You're looking very dapper. I like it. All right, and also Atropos, the founder of Tamriel Foundry, and of course an unannounced Ashes of Creation project. Ooh, mysterious.
Ooh, very exciting. Yeah, thanks, Aggelos. Happy to be back.
Excellent, excellent. And finally, Truth Eternal, that the voice behind Journal of Ashes, the community participation project over there he has, as well as his own channel, which will start doing some Ashes of Creation related content, I assume, later on in the future, and founder of Heavenly Sword Gaming. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming back and not running away scared. So obviously last week we set up a little bit of groundwork for our discussion of the stock exchange, talking about MMO economies in general before moving into what we generally assume, and this will be the question for the entire crew, is what did you guys think when the stock exchange was revealed as a $3 million stretch goal? I know when I first saw it being launched and it was announced on their official live stream, there was a lot of, like questions from chat. Like there was a lot of, that's your 3 million stretch goal? Like, and I mean, this is coming from someone like from me, and I'll give my impressions first before really moving on to everyone else. That felt to me was something, it didn't strike home with me because I'm not an economic type person. I have a very, very minor thought process when it comes to these things. This is not my forte, and I rely on much smarter people to help me along with these types of things.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's why Isarii's here for these types of things. So it wasn't something that really struck home with me, and it left me with a lot of questions, which hopefully we will all be able to talk about and discuss some of our thoughts about how this is going to function when Ashes of Creation comes out. But I was kind of left with a thought of, I have no idea what's going on or how this is going to apply, because I've never seen it in any type of MMO, given the majority of MMOs I've played in at least the past decade have been theme parks, which really don't have this level of granularity when it comes to any type of financial systems. Mostly it results in... Yeah, I didn't play Eve. That's the thing. I don't play Eve. And if I like sci-fi, maybe I would. But, you know, other than playing the auction house, that was what most economy was. And that wasn't really... It didn't really affect the world outside of that. The same drop was always going to drop no matter what. The same vendor was going to sell me the same thing at the same price no matter what. I didn't care how much gold someone else had, other than the fact that they could buy a mount from a vendor before I could. That was all it really meant to me. Sorry, when you first saw the stock exchange, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I was kind of also in the what crowd where it definitely was a bit of a blind side. I didn't really see. I don't know. It seems like an odd thing to make a priority, and it'll be interesting to see how they manage to loop it into other game systems to where it's like a really compelling part of the game, because it has the potential to be that. Potentially. But I guess that's my first reaction, is mostly just...
So we shared the same thought process, I see. I like it. Atropos, how about you, sir?
Yeah, I was really surprised to see that stretch goal. I guess my split-second reaction was, that's pretty cool. And my 5 seconds later reaction was, I don't know if that's a good idea. I'm still not entirely sure that it's a good idea. I mean, I guess it's going to depend a lot on what it actually means. What actual systems they develop. I mean, I think we'll probably talk at some length about like what are our hopes or concerns for it, but yeah, it's a really interesting one that isn't something that we've really seen in other games, and I can see how I can imagine how it will work, but I'm not sure I can imagine how it can work well.
Okay, all right, makes sense. Finally, Truth Eternal. What about you, buddy?
So I saw it coming a mile away. No, who expects this? Nobody expected this. Come on, right? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Yeah, no, my very first thought, honestly, was markets rest in peace was number one, and then kind of number two was usury, abuse. That was kind of another thing. All these negative things coming to mind, and then as I settled down about it, I thought, okay, as I was very much like my colleagues here. Yeah, it depends on how they implement it. What parts of the stock exchange they get, right? It's a very complicated beast. I don't think it serves the game to emulate that stock exchange completely, but we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic, but see some glaring holes for sure.
It's funny that you said usury, because I immediately started thinking of like the Medici as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what's a period in history where this would even yeah, it's interesting.
That's right.
Wow. Just don't go try to build any domes with the money, okay? It's bad things happen, I'm telling you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump right on into this.
More of a Cards Against Humanity, like April hole. When was it? Was it the Christmas hole? The holiday hole? Wasn't that what they did? They did the funding drive to just dig a giant hole for as long as people would give them money to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be my monument to my financial success for sure.
Sad part is they probably made more money than you did. Anyway, no, I'm sorry.
It was a ton of money.
It was a lot of money.
So much money.
All right. So obviously the main question here is, obviously everything we're saying here for these episodes, especially this early on, is speculation. And I'm sure we will circle back around, and while these guys may not have realized it, Steven did say that they're going to start doing some dev diary sometime in the future where they're going to start explaining this. So guess what, guys? Once those come out, I'm bringing you guys all back on to kind of re-tear apart your thoughts. And
God.
Again.
I'll keep an eye out for your PayPal donation.
Yeah. No one here has been paid for their thoughts. No, I'm just kidding. So stock exchange, how do you guys think this is going to function? And instead of me picking on someone, I'm just going to go crazy nuts, and I'm just going to let someone say whatever they want at this point. Like, who wants to go first? How do you think this is going to work?
I think groundwork should sort of be laid at this point about what is stock and what is a stock exchange. And I don't this will be like a 1-minute conversation, but I've learned that sometimes you can jump into these things and people have no idea what you're talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So stock, most people probably know, is ownership in a company. The way it's initially distributed is through what's called an IPO, or an initial public offering, at least with a large company. Otherwise, it's people sort of forming, I'm getting too in the hairs here, but yeah, forming a company and they have like 30% each. That's technically stock. So you own the company, and thus you own a share of the profits that's roughly proportionate. That's kind of the basic idea there. And my initial question there is, how much of this are they actually going to try to actually get in a game system? The nodes are going to kind of form up on their own. They're not going to have set owners at the beginning who are then going to be selling off portions of their own stock in the company in an IPO-like format, or at least I wouldn't expect there to be. Maybe this is something that comes in down the line after established guilds have slots in a node and they're able to sell off ownership portions of it. This could also happen with guilds and not just nodes. There's so many questions. So many questions. Are we going to see dividends paid out of nodes as you distribute the profits from the nodes? Is that going to be part of a budget line? I'm very, very confused. Like, there's so many questions once you start to think about how these things actually work in real life, and they may not attempt to do any of that. It could just be a very simplistic system. And last thing, will there be real ownership shares where there's only 100% ownership that after that has to be obtained from a player who already owns ownership in a node or guild or other sort of financial entity? Or will it be created out of thin air by the game, as items often are? So
a little bit of speculation, kind of, when I want to throw that in there before I let anyone else talk about it.
There's my food for thought.
I honestly don't think like that last point you made about that 100% ownership and no more can be above that. I mean, they're kind of already embracing that idea with the idea of property ownership with houses being limited in nodes. Like in-node housing is already going to be limited to, you know, whatever the set number is. We don't really know. But once the houses are taken, that's it. There's no more available. So it's not like this company is going to shy away from the idea of a limited resource. You know what I mean? Like just because they did it in one area of the game, I could see you going, well, maybe they're not going to do that if they never did it anywhere else. But they've already done it in other aspects of the game, so I don't see why that would hamper them from doing it in, you know.
And there's shares are functionally unlimited anyway, even in a real thing. It's not like they just become smaller and smaller as you keep doing what's called a stock split. So I mean, you could do that, but the question is, you know, my question was really, is the game just going to create shares, or do they have to come from a player who can keep splitting them down to the point where it's?
And even more to the point about that too. I mean, how does the game going to decide who does that initial splitting, right? Who's kind of heading the whole thing up, right? And so I agree with you. I mean, I see you either have to go one way, right? One way or another. You either have kind of an IPO, very robust kind of system that starts there and then all kind of trickles away from that, or you have to go super simplistic and make this just a completely like speculative, you're placing puts and calls on certain outcomes within the world, and that's it.
There could be some middle ground, I think. You know, it could be that as a node is formed, you know, one of the actions that players can do to engage with that node, just like you can go there and purchase a home if there's a home available, or you can go there and deposit resources if you want to contribute towards the growth of the node. You know, there may just be a way to invest at any point in a node by depositing some amount of resources outside of a whole concept of an IPO or sort of puts and calls. You know, you could be able to just allocate resources to a node with the promise of a potential future return. How that return is generated and how you benefit from it is like still a little unclear to me. Like how does a node generate value for investors? I mean, presumably there's a number of systems and services that the node provides where the game is taking money from players as a result of that. Like you're, you know, buying food in the tavern, you're repairing your armor at the blacksmith, you're paying for travel at, you know, travel related NPCs, you know, maybe some fraction of those services that the node provides is how the holders of equity in the node are compensated and rewarded. But, you know, it seems a little strange to me still to think about it that way. And I mean, for it to be worth someone's time to invest in a node, you have to be at least hoping rationally that you're going to receive a greater expected rate of return than you can do under, you know, and using any other game system with those resources. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they balance it. And, you know, will the revenue generated by a node be sufficient to entice investors, or will that be more casual gamers who don't have a dedicated sort of power gaming related channel for their currency and resources?
There could be a way, actually, before we get too lost in the weeds, just for anybody listening, because I'm going to use the term equity. Atropos kind of broke it up there. That just means ownership. I think most people probably know that one too, but I've learned not to make assumptions.
Are you saying I didn't know that?
I'm sorry.
I clearly didn't.
Yeah, so equity is the same thing as ownership. It's, the quantity of ownership you have. I kind of started envisioning a system where, while Atropos was talking, that was kind of what he was describing, where basically a node or a guild has a certain valuation, and how that's valued is going to be a giant bag of worms on its own that I know Truth was already looking to get into at some point, so I won't go there yet. But let's say the node, the guild, has a certain value in the game economy that's determined by the game. There could just be a system where you then contribute money. It would probably just limit it to currency, because contributing resources would be a whole other bag of worms, where the game would have to value that and factor the value of your contribution. But yeah, you would contribute, let's say, currency to this, and whatever portion of the current valuation of the entity itself, you were just granted equity equal to that, to your percentage contribution there, and then it grows, and everybody else retains sort of it would, I guess, be, I don't know, contemporaneous value-based equity, where it's based on the value of the contribution you made at the time, and then it just sort of grows if the company grows, and shrinks if the company shrinks, and there's no sort of player-to-player stock. It's just something that's managed, although there could be, I guess, but it's something that's largely managed by the system, and it's pretty simple. I don't know if that made any sense. I tried to keep it simple.
It sort of did, but I kind of have a question here I'm going to throw in here. When you say about a player investment, or not a player investment, a player contribution. I like that word, but in my mind, it could either be willing or unwilling. Unwilling being in the form of taxation, which we know will exist in the world, which you can't get away from.
Nick, when I say contribution, good question, I'm definitely only meaning like deliberate, willful investment, and not any sort of fee or anything like that you may incur.
What's sort of strange to me is that there already, even before this stretch goal, there already was a direct mechanism to invest in a node that is actually probably more immediate to the valuation of the node than a stock market, in that if you purchase property which is limited within a node, the value of that property, because players can sell property to other players, the value of that property is probably the best commodity, the best valuation that there will be of the value of the node, I would think. I have trouble imagining a different asset that is more reflective of what a node is worth than what one of the mansions in that node is worth. So I think it's kind of strange that they're adding kind of a second layer of a way to invest in a node when there already is such a primary mechanism for that.
And you don't think city taxation falls into that value of a node? Because whenever the governing party sets a taxation rate, the taxation rate if it's going to be anything like I'm trying to think of what game it was that had guild taxes. I think it was Lineage. I can't remember. But it literally took a percentage of whatever you earned in combat and just immediately took it for the...
So taxes flow as an inflow into the budget of the node, and then if there is any net income at the end of the period, that becomes part of the node's equity, which will go up or down, which is the value of the node, depending on whether or not they turned a profit or were operating at a loss for that period. So that would be the point at which the player's share of the equity of the node would change in value. So tax is not necessarily a part of the value in like a balance sheet sense, but it's one of the big factors in changes in equity.
Okay. Because in my mind, I can just, like you saying, with direct contribution, to live in the node and not necessarily want to physically contribute in terms of willingly contributing to a node, if I have no connection with the node other than my house is there, like my guild is not the ruling party of a said node, why would I want to contribute to its success other than my house not being destroyed? So the idea of me doing a willing contribution is much lower than taxation, which I cannot get away from just because I'm a citizen of.
Well, it's exactly like real stock. Why would you go just give money to a company? It's an investment, because as the company grows, you are now a part owner of the company, and your contribution, or what the contribution bought you, which is the stock or the ownership share, becomes more value as the node grows or prospers.
Okay.
I could envision,
and then you can sell it.
Go ahead and toss it to Truth.
Yeah, it looks like Truth was trying to say something.
No, that's fine. No, you know what? I'm going to throw a total curveball in, and I'm sure you guys will shoot it down pretty quick because you'll see some issues with it. But I was thinking, what about some kind of personal wealth of the citizens of the node factoring into the value of the node? Vis-a-vis the stock exchange. Could you see that the personal wealth entering that at all?
from a can I throw in like a dummy question before we do any of that? How do you, and I'll let they'll probably, when you say tear it apart, how does my personal wealth, and I get what you're saying, like, okay, you have a lot of wealthy citizens, therefore the value of your node is obviously much higher, but how does someone who invests in it going to get any portion of the value when that value technically does not exist in the city's coffers to be distributed? It exists within my pocket.
When, as I would like to do at basically any given moment, you seize the assets of the bourgeois within your node, because all property is theft, and then incorporate that into the coffers of the node, you have then reclaimed that value.
Are you trying to bring in your glorious socialist?
I don't even know where to start with you right now. Sorry. I'm going to pretend that comment was not made.
It's the best way to do it.
I feel like there's a couple possible ways this could go. My most likely bet at this point is that the investment market is kind of a mechanism of convenience that can help them solve the problem of what to do with excess resources within a node, in that they might not want to have there be any sort of drama or social contention about, suppose the ownership structure of a node as far as the guild that's controlling it, or the in the event of a divine metropolis, whoever's grinded out the most daily quests or whatever it is that determines who's running the show.
Dailies for Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they want to avoid a situation where the node has generated excess revenue and they have to either just poof it away or have it accelerate the node's development. Maybe the stock market, the equity system, is just a convenient mechanism for them to allocate that in what seems to be a fair way that would reward players for their input. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit too cynical as far as the convenient game mechanics aspect of it.
That is one way that you could do it, which would be to never have, if you're paying out dividends equal to your profit each end of period, whatever that is, that would be a way to never have the value of stock change, for example, because they would just, the total value of the node would never change in that circumstance. You would just have profits paid out to people who invested.
And in that case, the wealth of the node's citizens, as Truth commented, could at least be a second order factor in terms of the revenue that the node would generate, if not necessarily a direct input to the node's value. If your node has more wealthy players that live there, potentially its capacity to collect tax revenue would be greater, and therefore the earnings that would be then distributed to holders of equity of the node would also be greater.
I do think that they want to have the equity of a node change in value, though, because it seems like stock trading is the big thing that they've described in the two sentences that we know about the system.
I don't know. I'll be really surprised if players are trading stock with other players. I suspect it'll be either you put money in or you take money out, but it's going to be more of a system.
That's what I've been describing as well so far, because I think that's there's the pie in the sky vision of how it works exactly like real life, and then there's how is this going to work in a game, and in a game I'm kind of on board with you. They'll surprise me if it's not sort of a pay in receive rewards type system.
Agreed.
Can I ask? I want to steal Aggelos' job for a second. Can I ask a quick question?
Go for it.
Okay? Are you going to fight me?
No, I'm not going to fight you.
Okay. All right. What do they mean by social organizations? On the Kickstarter, it says allows players to invest in nodes, guilds, and social organizations. What is a social organization that is not a node or a guild? Is it the trade? The religion?
It's it might include the religions, but there was also that stretch goal with the additional player progression segments. The
progression paths. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's
kind of what
it
I
is.
was thinking.
Yeah,
Thieves Guild. That was my first reaction.
Do we know
Scholars Academy and the Traders Guild?
Do we know? Do those organizations have a taxation mechanism?
As far as we do not know that,
maybe membership dues of some sort.
Maybe revenue from quests that you do for them. You know, like maybe it just like magically, you know, whatever the case may be is, oh, you finish a quest. Oh, your quest reward was 500 gold. The quest was worth 600 and 100 goes into the whatever, the social organization coffer. I don't know. Like
the fund. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, just like in any real life organization, you know, or however you're paying out your employees, someone does a work, you do a service, the company pays you, but they charge more, you know, like I know this from the type of work that I do. You know, I get paid a certain tax rate, but if I get sent, or not tax rate, I get paid a certain amount for my income, but I know the company charges whoever I'm being, you know, contracted out much more. You know, I might be getting paid $50 an hour, but they're charging the company I'm working for $150 an hour, and you know, they're taking in that excess. So when I finish my contract and get my quest reward, I'm only getting at $50 an hour, not $150, which was what we charged the person who we were.
Are you trying to get more like wage slavery jokes out of me?
Price greater than marginal cost? Preposterous.
Wow.
Yes, you're describing capitalism.
Wow. Yeah. No, I just like to push Isari's buttons here and let him do his, you know, glorious socialist, you know, whatever he wants to call it. I don't know.
Communist memeing.
Communist memeing.
Verbal shit posting.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my thought, right? Like, I don't know. I imagine that there's going to be some sort of game value that is attached to any time you do a quest, right? Like, you know, you do a quest for this part and money is magically brought into this because obviously it's a game. So, you know, they can make currency however they want. They can assign an arbitrary value to anything that you do. And that follows the same idea of guilds. Like, if I'm investing in a guild that's not my own, a company can choose not to pay out dividends. Why would they want to pay out the excess money? Like, if they did a raid or whatever and they came away with a certain amount of profit, why would I care if Atropos, you know, sent money into the guild? Why would I want to pay out those dividends instead of investing it back in the guild, you know, so we can continue doing what we're doing? There has to be some sort of game mechanic involved in order to get payouts. Like, here's a question for you guys. Like,
that choice could just be taken out of the player's hands, right? Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was the question.
The scenario we've been exploring at this point.
Yeah, that is my question. Do you think they're just going to remove the idea of paying dividends out of the player's hands? Like, especially if you're investing in a node, there is a player government involved. Can they choose just not to pay out dividends, or is that just taken out? Like, you know,
I think it'll be out of the player's hands because I think that you can't trust the MMO player to make the choice that is the one that you would intend with the spirit of the system. Like, people will just not do that.
Well, and there's also a level of complexity that would come in with, you know, actually giving people agency in determining how investment is used, how revenue is used. You would basically have to have a little income statement and a little balance sheet in a node management system where players are sitting there tweaking. Okay, we're gonna stick X amount of our money to trade routes and this much to fortifying the walls. And I don't know if it could happen. Eve exists. I mean, although Eve doesn't do a stock market.
Can I bring in another thing here, like that if you listen to episodes like 7 or 8 when we really talked about geopolitics, we also kind of got into the idea of the human factor, right? There is always the human factor in anything. So like if the player agency is there, meaning that the choice is not removed, like you said, why, you know, the game would remove it from the player's hands, but why would you want to do that in this system? Because allowing it to be in the player's hands gives the investors the opportunity to go, okay, they're not paying out dividends. Why? Well, and if they're like, because we're not going to, then what prevents the person from going, fine, I'm going to take my money and go to your competitor node across the way who may wage war on you?
So the obvious way this would work, though, is that the investors are the ones making the decisions, just like with a real company. You get votes in accordance with your share of equity, and you can either choose to dedicate more of your resources to things like caravans, and caravan protection, which could potentially increase your income through non-node sources, as well as benefit the node's growth as a whole. You could, defend the node to keep your investment from getting destroyed when somebody comes to siege it. Or you could try to run like a really low cost, really low expense if you feel like you're safe, not really invest that much, and just try to keep as much of the tax money as you can flowing out as dividends to you and your fellow investors. I mean,
my assumption is that that's actually exactly how the leadership of the economic metropolis will be determined, right? I mean, is everyone in agreement that it will probably be the holder or holders of the greatest equity in the economic metropolis node? Does anyone disagree with that premise?
Honestly, it makes the most
sense to me. You could just literally buy your office. It depends how much they want to model it. It could just be like a bidding type situation, like we've seen for housing in games like BDO.
That would be
an amazing gold sink, and it would have like built-in term limits, I suppose.
Because if you're forced to keep your money in the economic node in order to retain your controllership of the economic node, then that's a kind of crafty way for them to pull a lot of money out of circulation and keep it out of circulation for an extended period of time. I don't know. I think
I wonder if we'll see. Not sorry to talk over you. But any sort of equity investment system in things like warfare-oriented nodes or divine nodes or science.
I think that's a good question. Like, will the stock market premise be for all types of nodes, or will it just be for economic nodes?
Because I believe they said just for economic, because each specific node has its own level of why am I drawing
its own like progression
type.
Mechanic?
Yeah.
That would make sense, I think.
Before we get too far off of this topic, we've seen something like this before, and I know Isarii and Atropos know this really well. The election mechanics for economic nodes. Anyone think it's going to be like a blind bid system similar to guild traders in ESO?
I hope I never see a system that resembles that again.
Yeah. I hope not.
I mean, honestly, I had myself on mute there. Honestly, that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I look at it. I look at it and go, okay, it's how much money are you? The richest people can afford it, right?
So that's kind of what I said earlier. It's either a system where the people who hold equity hold control in a voting mechanic, essentially equal to their equity in the company and the share of ownership that represents, or it's a buy-in system which is divorced from ownership in the node, where you basically just sink a bunch of money into the node and then you get to make some decisions. And
I think it'll be the latter.
Agreed. Yeah.
That'd be so lame if it had nothing to do with the stock.
They already have a node that's devoted to voting mechanics.
Wait, are we?
Yep.
Are we talking about the science node?
No, we were literally talking about economic node and the elite oligarchy who's going to control it.
Right.
Because, like you said, the voting, the democratic election is via the science node. The dailies for Jesus is.
Sorry, I'm not talking about voting to determine who is ruling the node. I'm talking about voting amongst members of the ruling class in an economic mode.
Oh, you mean like if multiple economic seats are filled, how they're going to make decisions?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, well, that really goes into
TBD.
Yeah, it would probably be. If I were designing the game, I would do something like the 5 biggest shareholders get to vote on things.
You're looking at the Council of 13 from Carth or whatever. Yeah,
and they're gonna want the system to be transparent too. Like, they don't want it to be a mystery as to, like, they want it to be aspirational for people to become a controlling party in a metropolis, and so they're not going to want it to be a mystery as, like, how did these 5 people get in charge? I mean, there's going to be some sort of leaderboard that's like, these are the 5 people that put in the most money, and here's how much they put in, and if you want to be on this list, put in more than these guys. They actually explicitly said, like, if you want to control the economic metropolis, you have to have a bigger, coin chest or whatever than your competitor. So I think it's going to be pretty straightforward.
Now, they also mentioned that these positions would be able to be bought and sold. So I mean, there's got to be a monetary value on said provision or on said positions.
Literally,
I mean, you can sell your position by just cashing out.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that is literally
exactly
what stock
is.
Right.
Right.
I think what you're thinking is that they could be bought and sold between players. I don't think it's going to be between players. I think it's going to be like a transactional mechanic with the game system where you buy in further, you go deeper, or you withdraw. At least that's my expectation.
I could see a system where it's between players, but I am cynically leaning with the Atropos that I expect they're going to want as much of this to just be managed by the system as possible.
Again, I'm only going off what I heard from. Again, I don't know about the initial and we're talking election and we're talking stock exchange, which I understand. Owning stock in the company, like this could affect the elite oligarchy. Like not only do you have to buy a position, you also have to have a certain level of stock ownership within a node in order to even be considered. But they specifically mentioned at some point, again, everything is subject to change, and this is why we theorycraft, because it's fun. But they were saying that these positions could be bought and sold, and the idea was between players. I get elected for whatever reason, and Isarii comes up to me going, listen, dude, I really need to be in control for whatever reason. I'm willing to buy the spot off of you. It was valued at X amount. For whatever reason, I did not get in. I will pay you so much more to abdicate your spot to me.
Or transfer your shares.
Or transfer your shares.
If that's a stock based.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something we could see.
Right. So any other thoughts on stock exchange before we, I mean, we kind of already talked about stock exchange, how it affects the leadership in economic metropolises. Do you guys feel like this is going to affect any other form of leadership position, seeing as the scientific node is a pure Greek democracy, essentially, and military is, going to be some sort of arena type system, I imagine, where it's like I imagine it being something like an arena season to determine who the leader is, and the dailies for Jesus is the divine nodes. Do you think the stock exchange is going to affect anything other than economic?
They have said other player organizations, obviously, but if you mean just the other metropolis government types,
yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Yeah,
it'd be confusing, too weird.
I think the answer is no in the way that you mean the question, but I think there's definitely second order effects to systems like this. I think that when you add a system like rich financial tools to your game, you're going to probably increase inequality within your player base. You're probably going to empower certain players who are more sophisticated or have more time to spend with the system, who will get further ahead as a result of it. And I think that certainly can determine the power structure of other nodes indirectly, in that you're empowering players to get very wealthy using systems provided within the game, but not as like a first order, your position is determined by your stock holding. No, I don't think so.
Gotcha. A question that I really had here, in truth, I kind of want you to answer this one. Whether or not you know the answer, I don't know, but it's kind of interesting. What in the world do you think we could invest in a guild for? Like, how is a guild's value going to be established? I mean, everyone can answer this at some point, but I kind of want to hear truth first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, that's right. That's the question. Naturally, that's exactly where we're going with this conversation, right? So I know one of the things that was mentioned on the actual Kickstarter itself, right? It mentioned really good, right? You need good data to make these kinds of decisions. One thing they mentioned was trade routes, for instance, right? So I'm just as one specific example, I'll throw out, because I'll leave some for you guys to speak to. But the success or failure of trade routes, and how what percentage of things pass without incident, or maybe how much percentage of the goods make it from one place to another, something like that, right? It would kind of be maybe a logical extension. I don't know if you guys have other examples of things that might contribute to moving the value of that equity up or down.
Yeah, I think there's, again, kind of two ways at looking at it. There's they could go a super gamey route, like you're describing, which is realistically probably where I see them going. Or it could just be a total bastardization of the node system where they just copy pasted onto smaller scale entities and guilds have budgets all of a sudden. And they have said that, they're going to have more robust guild management tools in this game than we are used to. If they go to that level, I really don't know. Like, I don't see many people wanting to actually manage that kind of thing. And leading a guild is already a huge pain without forcing every guild leader to suddenly be a financial wizard. Who's, okay, we're going to move funds to here and funds to here. Because usually it's only the relatively hardcore doing that thing. So right. I could potentially see it working the exact same way as what we described for nodes. Whether or not I think it'll happen that way is a very different question.
I think there's two interesting features of the stock market with regards to guilds that can actually maybe bring something slightly different than the economic node. One is that it allows for all players to participate with that game system, not just people who are invested in an economic node. So, suppose you're the kind of person that wants to do a divine node or you want to do a science node, like that's your main thing. This at least still lets you engage with that system in a way that, can be more immediately beneficial for you. That's one thing. I guess the second thing is they've said, they kind of want to have a certain degree of group agency with guilds as far as the services that they can provide within the world. So like maybe there's a guild from a warfare node that's like all the most badass fighters in the game server. And suppose you really need to get some caravans of resources to your node to advance it really quickly. Like maybe you want to retain the services of this super badass guild to help protect your caravan to get from point A to point B. Perhaps the mechanisms of investing in a node provides like a within-game market for players to compensate guilds for services rendered.
Okay. Before we wrap that up, sorry, I know you had something else to mention.
What if it's like an employee-earned company where members go into a guild and they're granted, let's call it DKP, for participating in guild events, and that represents their ownership in the guild. And then we can start yelling minus DKP at people, and it'll actually have an impact. I love this. Let's do this. Please do this.
That's a 50 DKP minus. I love it. Yeah, I guess before we move on to the last topic, the last thing I want to say about this is, I honestly felt like half the time you guys were just saying random words. But with that being said, no, I did follow a good bit. But this is being a game. I mean, I like these ideas, and it'd be amazing if they did it. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to try to include as many people as possible. So we're going to probably start looking at more gamey-ish systems than more real life systems, because not everyone in real, and I mean and I'm not one of those people that says everyone has to have everything. I'm quite the opposite of that. But at the same time, any system that is so complicated that at least half of your player base can't understand it is a system that generally goes to waste in one way or the other.
And again, Eve exists, so you never know.
There's always those outliers. Okay, so the final thing we wanted to talk about for this is the potential risk of Ashes of Creation's economic structure. Do we see anything such as, RMT, different incentives for farmers, bot sellers, anything of that nature? And then we'll go from there. So I think Atropos, this was your topic, right? Like, did you fill that in?
Yeah, I jotted that note down.
All right.
I guess I wonder, I think with every MMO, there's questions about like how well will the economy function with regards to extra game activities? To what extent can that be healthy for a game? To what extent can it be damaging? Certainly if they're providing tools to facilitate the trading of commodities, like, one thing we didn't mention about the stock market stretch goal is it's not just the market. They also said they're adding in-depth economic performance metrics for commodities. So like they're adding in-game UI for tracking prices, for doing all sorts of stuff. I guess I'm curious to see to what extent people start, if Ashes is really successful as a game, to what extent do people who aren't really interested in Ashes strictly as a player start looking at it as a potential investment vehicle or opportunity to make money off of the interest of the player base?
I see what you're saying. Okay. You're more or less saying someone going like with the RMT incentives for farmers, like if they can go, okay, if I can get a little bit of money and I can, have someone who can play these, the stock exchange, can I turn that into some sort of like real money transaction?
Well, yeah, I mean, and with like real-time performance metrics and pricing metrics for your commodities, you're kind of providing a toolkit that is the toolkit that people would need if they want to approach Ashes purely as a job rather than as a hobby.
Right. Truth. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Oh, man, you took the words right out of my mouth. I don't even know that I can put it any better than that, to be honest. Yeah, those people that want to make it a job, that's gonna be killer. Something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. Isarii, how about you?
Well, I also agree with that, so I'll talk about something else instead. I managed to come up with something. I guess the risk of RMT in terms of a lot of the financial systems we've been talking about here tonight, is this going to make RMT potentially a bigger problem in Ashes? Because RMT is going to exist anyway. It just is. There's going to be gold farmers in any game. But is it more probable that players will screw up the game by partaking in that gold farmers will be able to materially affect the outcome of leadership struggles within a node? Are we going to see people sort of indirectly paying to win that way? And I guess I would liken it to vying for capital ships in stations in EVE, which is I see a lot of this likely being the efforts of groups of players, a monumental effort to be an economic node leader, where it's not going to be one rich guy. It's going to be one really organized guild who's representative, or maybe it will be at the guild level, to be honest. But, who is, if it's just at an individual level, it's going to be probably people like the Goons, where you've got 500 people supporting one guy and sort of funneling economic efficiency into this person who can outperform any individual that's vying for a seat in that type of node. And it's really hard for gold farmers and RMTD to make an impact in that, because the amount of work you would have to pay someone to do to farm up that much value, what entire guilds are capable of doing, like the no-lifer guilds, not the casual guilds, is a lot. You don't see people going and buying capital ships in EVE. Every time you hear of a huge battle that happened there, they're like, $30,000 has been destroyed tonight. RMT doesn't affect on that level. Yeah. And, we're probably not going to see that level of RMT conversion value being at play in the leadership of economic nodes, which is going to be where this is at its biggest. But I do think it's going to be big enough that the impact is going to be maybe not material, maybe not felt regularly.
And at the end of the day, if your game is popular enough within the player base that there is a strong potential for real money value to be at play, then probably that's more of a good thing for the players of the game in the long run, because it means you've got a really thriving MMO rather than one that nobody cares about.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, that was our discussion on the stock exchange and economies and MMOs. Obviously, thank you so much for watching From the Ashes. I'm Aggelos, and I want to thank my guest host on this Phoenix Roundtable, our community discussion segment for this podcast. First off, we got Isarii. Can you let people know where they can find you? Oh, what?
I'm sorry. I have a closing thought.
Okay,
can
closing
I please,
thought. Go for it.
Please.
Right.
I'm sorry. One thing that occurred to me while we were talking, and I took a mental note later, and I was like, I got to mention this later, and then I forgot. One thing I thought about is something Intrepid's doing that I find really interesting is they seem to be playing the long game with a lot of their systems, in that if you think about the way they're structuring the referral system, the way they're opting for a subscription-based business model, the way that they're developing housing mechanics for players to be invested within a physical property within the world, the way they're developing nodes, the way they're giving each server sort of a unique story arc that differs from others. It seems like a lot of these mechanics might be kind of related in the sense that they're encouraging players to think long-term about their engagement with Ashes as a game, and perhaps to a certain extent, an stock investment mechanic in the game sort of furthers that goal.
Insanely well put. And what were you going to say? Sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that was all I was going to say. Yeah, no, that's a really good thought.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong. And to kind of piggyback off that, you mean, obviously one of their taglines, making MMOs great again.
Let's not.
No, what made MMOs great in the past? It was always this long-term goals you would set for yourself. And a lot of modern MMOs have removed that long-term goal and made it a quick, instant gratification game that you can get everything out in 2 months, and so you can have time to move on to the next one. So having the idea of playing the long game is something that MMOs have not done in a very long time, and if that is what they are indeed doing, it's refreshing. It's definitely refreshing. Yep. All right, back to what we were saying. Sorry, where can people find you?
People can find me at errantpenman.com or twitter.com/Ethan McPhee, ETHANMACFIE. And next week they can find me here in Portland pulling against the Atropos' soccer team.
Atropos, do you have any counters to that? And where can people find you?
I mean, he lives in Portland, so we have to cut him a break. People can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/FoundryNet. The Foundry pertains to an ESO Tamriel Foundry and perhaps a soon-to-be-announced Ashes of Creation-related community project. So please stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about it. I hope you all will be too, and I can't wait to launch it.
It's awesome.
I can say I'm helping with it too. So
yeah,
there's just a lot of us here. We have this giant incestuous relationship between all of our projects. So we all kind of let's just all mesh it together. So definitely check out FoundryNet. But of course, as soon as it launches, you'll also hear it here from the Ashes, because I'm sure I'm going to shout it out too. So obviously that's going to happen. And Truth, how about you, buddy?
Yeah, cool. So a couple places on YouTube. You can find my community participation story channel by searching Journal of Ashes. You can also find my personal channel, which will have some Ashes content up very soon, just by searching Truth Eternal. And finally on Discord and online with Heavenly Sword Gaming at heavenlyswordgaming.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. I really do appreciate you guys coming on the show. I mean, I had a lot of fun, even though I had very little input, and I'm really glad and appreciative that you guys were willing to come on to this community segment, and definitely going to have all of you guys on again. You all did fantastic. And I mean, when we finally realized how the stock exchange is going to happen, I think we're all going to have to come back on and go, how right or how wrong were we?
So
that would
wrong.
Be really fun, actually.
I'm
betting
wrong.
very wrong. I'm betting very wrong.
I think that's something we're definitely going to have to do. Is we're going to have like a post stock exchange where we all come back and go, what were we?
Relive our shame.
What was in this
drink? Playback snippets of this podcast and just
yeah, that would be fun. All of us just sitting here and just play it on the side. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, that was awesome. But definitely thank you. Check out everything that these guys do. They're all amazing. That's why I invited them on here. Great guys. Awesome members of the community. And, I mean, hey, I like talking to them, so here we go. All right, you can find everything we do, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com, youtube.com/dungeoncrawlernetwork. I mean, really anywhere. Facebook, Twitter, all that. Search Dungeon Crawl Network. You'll probably find us. From the Ashes podcast. We really appreciate it. We will be back next week with yet another show, because that is what we are determined to do. Thank you so much. We hope to see you in Ashes of Creation. See you later.